You wake to the low glow of a screen, and before you have thought the first thought of the day, 100 small voices have already decided for you. They tug at your attention with the quiet insistence of a practiced hand, and somewhere between the scroll and the ping, you lose the shape of your intention. This is not a failing of will. It is the modern condition of excess choice and silent demand. Imagine a different response. A single rule, learned in the way of the sword, that returns you to clarity. Listen now to the lesson that samurai used to cut through noise, and how one contemporary person learned to live by it. Chapter 1. The Awakening. Miyamoto Musashi, the wandering swordsman, wrote that, "Perceive that which cannot be seen with the eye." He meant attention that is not lured by appearance, a form of seeing that resists illusion. Our protagonist, Naomi, a software designer in her 30s, discovered that her day was divided not by work and rest, but by interruptions, emails, notifications, and a restless mind that tracked them like prey. She felt diminishing satisfaction in projects that once mattered, and a creeping sense that her identity had become porous, shaped by every small demand that landed on her screen. Chapter 2. The Quiet Compulsion. Naomi tried the usual remedies: timers, focus apps, lists written at dawn, yet the compulsion returned, not as a thunderclap, but as a whisper that lived inside her palm. The samurai called attention a battlefield, and taught that battles are won by preparation and by eliminating the unnecessary. Musashi trained to simplify his engagement with the world until his decisions were inevitable and untroubled. Naomi realized she needed a rule that would create a hard edge, a boundary that would be respected without debate. Chapter 3. The Single Rule. She adopted a rule inspired by the warrior's discipline. For the first 2 hours of her day, she would engage in one uninterrupted craft. No messages, no feeds, no multitasking, only focused creation or deliberate solitude. This was not a productivity hack, but an ethical posture, a promise to herself modeled on Bushido's emphasis on rectitude and self-command. In time, she framed it as a ritual, a samurai's kata for the modern mind: prepare, enter, protect the work. The rule can be simple in language and grave in effect. Its power comes from consistent, unargued enforcement. Chapter 4. The Internal Battlefield. The first mornings were always the hardest. The body and the mind send signals of discomfort where habit is interrupted. The reach toward the phone, the itch to check, the small rationalizations that sound like necessity. Musashi taught that the true struggle is inside, that the outward enemy is secondary to the internal toss of desire and fear. Naomi learned to name the voices: curiosity, dread of missing out, obligation, and to let them speak without obeying. Naming reduced their authority and reclaimed the center of her attention. Chapter 5. Small Non-Negotiables. The samurai did not rely on motivation. They built systems in the form of rituals and non-negotiable acts. Naomi converted her rule into a small set of non-negotiables: a morning tea without devices, a single notebook open for sketching ideas, and the 2-hour uninterrupted interval written into her calendar like a meeting with honor. These small acts required minimal energy to begin, but created a scaffolding that resisted erosion. Over weeks, the ritual moved from being an act of will to a statement of identity. She was someone who guarded the beginning of her day. Chapter 6. Elimination as Strategy. Bushido teaches economy in action. Unnecessary movement exposes one to risk. Naomi learned to remove rather than resist. She deleted apps that produced endless distraction, moved social accounts off her home screen, and created blocks that were not polite suggestions, but firm closures. Elimination is different from restraint. It alters the terrain. When the buzzing was no longer present, the mind adapted to the new quiet and discovered resources it had not known were there. Chapter 7. The Discipline of Presence. Presence, in Zen and in samurai practice, is not passive calm, but active clarity. Naomi practiced returning to the immediate task with a steady breath when her attention wandered, as a swordsman returns to stance after a parry. She trained her attention by anchoring to small sensory details, ceramic warmth of a cup, the angle of light on paper, the sound of a key under her hand. And these anchors became gates back to work. The practice revealed that distraction was often an avoidance of friction. Staying with friction strengthened her capacity. Chapter 8. Silence as Strategy. Silence is not absence, it is a tool. Samurai used silence to refine decision and to listen for truth. Naomi scheduled periods of deliberate silence beyond the morning ritual, walks without audio, dinners without devices, a weekly half-day of complete withdrawal from notifications. These silences function like sharpening stones for thought, reducing cognitive noise and allowing subtler patterns to become visible. When she returned to conversation or work, she did so with a quieter mind and more precise choices. Chapter 9. Identity over Motivation. The most profound shift was not an increase in output, but a shift in identity that mirrored the samurai's self-definition through discipline. Naomi stopped asking whether she felt like working and began asking who she wanted to be. The rule and the rituals were not temporary techniques. They were declarations about the kind of person she would house herself within. The small, repeated acts of honor accumulated into a durable self-image, one that resisted the daily erosions of distraction. Chapter 10. Surrender and Calm Strength. There is a paradox at the center of samurai practice. Mastery requires surrender to a discipline that is larger than desire. Naomi discovered that surrender was not defeat, but acceptance of a structure that allowed her freedom. By giving up the illusion of constant availability, she gained a deeper responsiveness. Her relationships improved, her work deepened, and a certain calm authority settled into her voice and actions, the kind Musashi speaks of when he writes of knowing without being knowable. Chapter 11. Systems for the Long Way. The samurai were builders of systems, training, ritual, and envoys of arrangement that outlasted fleeting will. Naomi designed her environment to support the rule. Her workstation became a place of clarity, with only the tools she needed. Her calendar held sacred blocks. Her evening routine signaled the mind to downshift. Systems do the quiet work of protection when attention is weak. They are not moral judgments, but architectures for human frailty. Chapter 12. The Measure of Success. Success in this practice is not measured by a number, but by the quality of your returning. Musashi did not seek victory for vanity. He sought a life aligned with his art. For Naomi, success meant fewer impulsive interrupts and more days where she completed a meaningful piece of work and could close her day without residual unrest. It meant that when noise did intrude, she had the discipline to meet it without unraveling. The measure became her consistent capacity to choose. Chapter 13. Applying the Rule. You do not need to imitate Naomi exactly. The principle is what endures. Choose a single early interval and make it unassailable. Convert that interval into ritual by pairing it with a sensory anchor and a small, non-negotiable act. Remove obvious temptations from the field and introduce silence deliberately into your schedule. Let the rule be a quiet teacher that shapes more than habit. Let it shape who you are. Conclusion. A quiet edge. The samurai kept a quiet edge, an internal sharpness that allowed them to act with clarity and to carry themselves without the loudness of modern distraction. To borrow their discipline is not to adopt an aesthetic, but to learn a posture toward attention, decisive, economical, and governed by principle. Begin with a single, small, absolute rule, and uphold it without argument, and you will find the digital noise receding, not because it has gone away, but because you have learned to stand differently within it.